Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to the podcast at Two Ticks and the Dog Productions. I am your host, Jim Fogarty. We have a killer show today. We got a great guest. Our guest has been fighting for workers' rights and making sure that schools that operate under the charter guise in Ohio are held accountable. He's a former state senator. He was a gubernatorial candidate in the Democratic primary just last year. He's a friend of ours. We're proud to call him a friend. We've done some work for him in the past too, so we can call him a client. It was a great and is a great guest, and we're proud to have him on today. Without further ado, I bring you our next guest. I'm so proud to have him on. I'm so excited that he is here, and I'm interested to have this conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Joe Schiavoni. Okay, we're rolling. Count us in. Everybody ready? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin. That's a Jim Morrison thing, if you guys don't remember. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. JoJo Dancer, your life is calling you. We're here with Joe Schiavoni today. Joe, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in, man. I know that you're probably super busy. Go ahead, yeah.
No, I mean life is a little bit different, but we're still busy, but in a different way. You know, doing a lot of stuff at the law firm, spending a lot more time with the kids, running around and trying to give everybody an opportunity to now kind of live their life too, because everybody was doing stuff for me for the past 10 years, and so now it's time for me to do stuff for them. So it's coming back around.
Yeah. You're kind of simplifying it, though, because you've done a lot for a lot of people for a long time. For anybody that's listening that's not from our local DMA, Joe Schiavoni was a 12-year Ohio state senator in the 32nd district?
It was 10 in the 33rd district.
Oh, 10. Yep. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Man, I got my facts wrong.
No, I got appointed for 2 years, and then I ran for 2 4-year terms. And the term limit is 8, but because I was appointed on the front end for 2, I was in there for 10.
So Joe is serving the state legislature and serving the constituents of Youngstown and the surrounding areas for 10 years, and then took a bid at governor. Big balls, awesome. We'll touch on that in a bit. Joe, you were an attorney. You still are an attorney, but you were a practicing attorney before being appointed to the state senate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Workers' comp and that kind of law?
You're right on.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about it. What was that like? You graduated from OU, then you went to Capitol, and then...
Yeah, I'm from around here. You know, I went to St. Dom's for elementary school on the south side of Youngstown, and then we moved to Boardman. I went to Boardman 5 through 12, went away to OU, Capitol Law School, came back, started representing injured workers, similar to what my grandfather did in this area. You know, it gave me great practice to what I was doing in the Senate, because you're dealing with people's serious problems and they want answers now. Somebody gets hurt at work, they don't want to screw around. They need money, they need medical treatment, they need somebody that's going to fight for them and somebody they can trust. Right before coming on here, I was down at the Industrial Commission in Youngstown doing that again. I mean, it was almost like, on Rocky, when Rocky goes back to the old neighborhood, right? It was like all the lawyers that were there 10 years ago were sitting in the same place, like, hey man, welcome back. There's your seat. Like it was, and it's something that I really enjoy doing as well, because people need that help and they need somebody that's going to fight for them. You know, a lot of companies are out to get them. A lot of companies are good, but a lot of them are bad. And so you got to make sure that when you're fighting for that person, you're giving it 100% because they need it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Fight and Rocky. Joe grew up going to being trained by Jack Lowe. Jack trained a bunch of champions in Youngstown. For our listeners out there, across the pond or otherwise, Youngstown, unofficially, I don't know if we ever got the stats. Tom Humphreys and Chris Litton and I were working on our project years ago. I think you and I might have even talked about with Ray Mancini, that Youngstown's got a ton of fighting pride, but also has the claim to the most champions, boxing champions, for a city that size per capita. We got 5 champions that came from Youngstown. And Joe grew up with a lot of these guys fighting in the same gyms. So he's got that fighter mentality. You're an athlete in school and you're a competitive guy, so the law thing probably fed into that. You're fighting for these people, like, hey, I want to get this guy. How does that work? I don't even know about workers' comp. I know I have to pay it every month as a business owner, but what the hell is it?
Yeah, it's different than the standard kind of practice of law. You're going in and it is all just a conversation about whether or not that person is hurt, how hurt that person is, whether they should receive compensation, whether they should receive medical benefits. And so it's not like law and order stuff where you're looking, you're looking at this jury and this judge. You're in a room like this kind of just figuring it out for the person. And, that's what I like about it. There's that freedom and that flexibility. But I am frustrated some because I spent 10 years trying to change the law based on what I thought the need for that change was. And so I had that freedom to be able to be like, if somebody asked me a question, I'd be like, this is what I think, and this is why I think it, and this is why I feel it, and let's do it. And now I got to follow the law. So when the hearing officer's telling me what to do, even if I don't like it, I got to do it. And that to me is a new frustration that I've never felt before. I think it was just because of what I've done for the past 10 years and what I'm now doing again. Before I didn't know about that. I didn't have that feeling before I was in the Senate, but now, I feel like a jerk saying this, but like I'm used to saying whatever I want. As long as it was sensible and reasonable and rational, I could fight about it and make the arguments. But now following the law, you got to follow the law.
How long did you practice law before being appointed?
5 years.
So 5 years, workers' comp, practicing with your dad. Your dad's got a great reputation in Youngstown for being a fighter and a great attorney.
He's a good dude. He's a good dude, and he's retired now. He comes in on Mondays and Fridays to make sure that I'm not screwing anything up, and then he goes home. He's in Florida right now with my mom, so he's enjoying life. I got my youngest brother lives in Denver, and he is a little baby, so he was out in Denver last week and hanging out there.
So you're practicing law. Did you always want to be involved in politics? Like, what made you go to the State House? Why did you seek that appointment?
Yeah, I wasn't that kid like in kindergarten that said like, oh, I'm going to be president of the United States. Like, it just kind of happened. I was working, doing the workers' comp stuff. I was volunteering with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. In 2008, John Bocherry vacated the Ohio Senate seat and ran for Congress. And at that point, the appointment process was taking place. And I'm reading the Vindicator and watching the news just like everybody else. And it says, hey, there's this open application process for Senate. I guess what happened was, and this was before I even knew what was going on, the Mahoning County Democratic chair sent a bunch of names to Capri Cafaro, who was the leader at that point. Capri didn't like any of them, so she said, we're going to do an open application process. And so at that point, I started digging in a little bit. I talked to Harry Michel, who used to be the president of the Senate, older guy, state senator, great guy. He said, Joe, this would be a great job for you. He said, put in the application, apply for it. Go down there and do it. And went through a series of interviews with the Senate Democratic Caucus, and they appointed me. So there was like 9 or 10 people that went for the appointment. So right off the rip, when I won, people were like, you're going to lose a primary. Nobody knows who you are. You're 28 years old. I had people coming at me all different ways. But we won. We did have a primary. We won. We had a general election. We won in 10. And then I ran unopposed in 14. So it's just, just do the work.
When you went down there, your undergrad from OU, it's not political?
No, it's just in communications. I had an easy major. When I went to law school, I had no idea how to study. Like, I always went to class. I studied. I thought hard in college, but really I didn't. When I went to law school, it was a rude awakening. I went from A's and B's easy to struggling for B's and C's, but that's how it was.
So you go down there, is it culture shock? You're not like this isn't your wheelhouse, for lack of better terms. You've been practicing for 5 years, so you understand how to negotiate and those kind of things. What was it? You're like, what do I do?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And what I did was to kind of ease that anxiety and that feeling of what do I do, I spent so much time in the Mahoning Valley talking to people about what was important to them and then crafting legislation based on the needs of my community so that I kind of insulated myself from all the political bullshit down in Columbus and spent most time here. And then I'd go down there and I would just hammer issues. education, blight, drugs, jobs, basic stuff that people need, and really just using experts here that felt that passion from me that was like, look, Joe, I want to help you. Even when people would hear me speak that were experts in education, they'd say, maybe you're a little off on the facts here of the history of what you're trying to do, but I can sense your passion and I want to help you. And then I would have those experts help me craft the legislation in order to get there. And so that's how we really started. And that's how I did it for the entire time I was down there.
I think that's really a wise practice I think it speaks to your maturity level at 28. I don't know what I was doing at 28, but I think Dennis Blank, who we had on this previous episode, said something brilliant a couple years ago. People from this area, like, we got a little bit of a chip on our shoulder and we wear our pride on our shirt sleeves. And we kind of, we go down there and we got a little bit of a, I'm going to do it my way, Frank Sinatra kind of style. I think it's brilliant of you to go down and go, hey, I don't really know all this stuff. I'm going to listen to some of these people that have been doing it, and then got them in your camp without saying, no, this is Joe Schiavoni's way. I'm from Youngstown. That's really, really a smart move.
Well, something that I learned growing up from my dad and my grandpa, both my grandpas, I mean, nobody likes some smart ass young punk. That doesn't know what they're talking about.
So true.
When you're talking to people that know what they're talking about. So you got to have that listen first mentality. And you have to, and it's not just fake listening. A lot of politicians fake listen. They nod their head. They even fake scribble shit on a notebook. But I do it. When I'm listening to somebody, I'm summarizing what they're saying for the hopes that I'm going to use that in order to make better policy. And I still do that. I mean, that's incredibly important. And then once you do that, you get those older, more experienced people to buy in. I mean, I was the youngest senator for the entire time I was there. It's not a young person's game down there in Columbus. Most state senators and state representatives are retired something else's, right? They're a retired teacher, a retired businessman, retired whatever. It's not something that a lot of younger people did at least 10 years ago. It's starting to move in that direction, but that's a little bit about it. And, I still love the fact that when I see people, they say, your office helped me, because that's what you're supposed to do. And I always had good staff that made that the number one priority.
Well, it's funny you said listening, because I wrote that down specifically. Joe is a very good listener, and it's active listening. You kind of point out these other politicians, and of course, our background with doing political media consulting. Most of our clients are pretty super at it too, but you recognize sometimes, there's people down there, they're just playing the role. I also love that you said it's starting to change a little bit, and so I want to press some credit in your direction. And I think it started with a group of people, but yourself, Sean O'Brien, even Michael Ruley now. I mean, he's a little bit older, but there are people who are younger that are not necessarily have had an extensive career in whatever those fields are, education or law or whatever, and they've gone down there and said, hey, I want to roll my sleeves up and learn and help my constituents. And this actually, so it led to your last 4 years, you're House Minority Leader. And what was that like, being in a leadership position, albeit a minority leadership, but a leadership position for the party?
It was way harder than the first 4 years, because the first 4 years I went down there with that get along with everybody mentality, try to get things done for the Valley. And so all of a sudden, when you get into the leadership stuff, now I'm the leader of the minority caucus that has 10 against 23. And so it changed from, hey, everybody likes Joe, everybody gets along, he's a good-hearted guy, he works hard, to this guy's got political ambition, and we have the power, Republicans, don't let this guy get stuff.
No kidding.
So
yeah.
A lot of the bills that I pushed, they didn't pass because they didn't want to give me the opportunity to say that I passed them. And that's okay, because that actually made me a lot tougher, to make sure that I was always looking over both shoulders and looking in front of me and looking this way and making sure people weren't trying to stab me, because they were. And that made me a stronger politician. I mean, the president of the Senate at that point, He's now the state auditor. He was ridiculously competitive and loved the power, and he was hard to get along with. But he made me a way better politician because I had to be on point every single day to battle that guy. It's like playing a basketball game with two guys. You know, they had 5, we had 2, and we had to make the best of our 2. And it was tough, but it is what it is. So it did change, and it gave me the ability to get out there more across the state to really connect with people.
Did you feel like you know, 10 years sounds like a long time to some people. It sounds short to others. Did you feel like in those 10 years you made some headway? And if you did, like, what do you feel like, what's your greatest accomplishment? What's the thing you're most proud of that you accomplished down there?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that, again, if you look in the records, you won't see my name as a sponsor of the bill that passed. But with charter school accountability, I would go to all these schools that were listed as like ABC Academy, XYZ Academy, all this crazy stuff. It would say tuition free and all these flashing signs and yard signs and meetings and carnivals. And I wanted to see what these were. They were nothing more than some guy that wanted to make money off education. The legislature was loose on it. They would buy up these old Catholic schools, throw up a couple signs, throw some desks in, hire some new teachers that couldn't get jobs at the public schools, call themselves a school. They weren't offering a better education. They were sucking the kids out of the public school because the dollar was connected to the kid. So I started pounding legislation 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Accountability, transparency, not only for the brick and mortar charter schools, but for the electronic schools, which is just a computer in a student's living room. And so today, it is much, much more difficult to be a for-profit charter school operator, whether it's online or brick and mortar, because of the work that we did. In 2016, Governor Kasich and the Republican legislature finally decided that it was time to do something. And so they put together a little bit of all my bills and called it their own. It was House Bill 2. And then they're all high-fiving each other and backslapping each other like they did something innovative. It's like, dude, those are all the bills that we've been talking about for 5 years. But it is what it is. That was the world that we were living in. I was in the minority talking about running for governor. They were never going to allow me to say, oh, yeah, we're going to stand up and support Joe's bill for charter school accountability. I mean, this was the biggest scam in the last 20 years in politics. They're allowing for-profit operators to open up and make money off our kids, and then they're getting campaign contributions from those same operators. That's criminal. And now, hopefully, you'll see less and less of those. I mean, ECOT closed. A lot of these other for-profit operations have closed down as well.
Bro, that's a great, I got a great segue here in a second, but that's a great way to put it. And I want to touch on that real quick, how you said someone else brought this to the table and they ran with it, and you were okay with it because you knew. I always tell this. I've been on a lot of volunteer boards and whatever, and you know, when you're a volunteer and you're not in a position of power, either as an administrator or as a whatever it is, okay, right? You're not an elected official, and I would always say, like, I don't care who takes the credit for it. Let's just get this done. Oh, if you know, official A, B, or C wants to ride with it, no problem. Let's get them on board because we just want to get it done. And I think that's a brilliant way to do it because you knew that the greater good was not necessarily the credit for yourself to position yourself at a higher level for further office or whatever, but it was the good of the kids, the good of the community. That's a brilliant thing. Brandon has a question. We asked some questions from time to time on our social media pages, and it's a question directly towards education. I actually saw it before things, so don't read the. There's a really glowing. It's right. A little longer to save time. There's a really glowing. I'll show it to you afterwards. A really glowing review of you and your time in the Senate. And
but this question goes right into it,
yep.
And it's our one of our questions from our prodders out there in cyberspace. Her name is Kristen. Her question is, Joe, with all the proven fraudulent acts that were unveiled with this online school, which ultimately led to its closure. Is there anyone currently in office who is continuing to pursue this fight to return funds to public schools in Mahoning and Trumbull County? She states that this company siphoned millions, $2 million from Niles alone, then filed bankruptcy. She finds it hard to believe that the money is just gone. Is there any way this can still be recovered for our local schools?
Yeah, there are still legislators that are working on the issue. Governor DeWine has said that he's going to continue the lawsuit that he filed when he was Attorney General. The new Attorney General, Yost, has also, he was the auditor, so he's saying that he is also going to be doing more things in order to try to recover this money. The problem is the longer that it goes, the less likely of any actual monetary recovery, because where are you going to get the money from? I mean, these guys have hit the road. I mean, ECOT is gone. They had a beautiful facility down in Columbus. All of their executives were making tons of money. Like now the longer you let this web kind of untangle, the more difficult it is to actually recover the money in order to give it back to the students in the public schools. The bill that I proposed right before I left said that we should recover these dollars from them and then split it evenly back to all the public schools based on the number of kids that left those public schools for ECOT or whatever electronic school. I mean, it's the easiest way to do it. And so there's still legislators that are fighting that, but it's an issue that will die if people don't continue, like Kristen, don't continue to bring it up and make sure that their legislators are fighting for that, because it really is ridiculous. I mean, ECOT closed in the middle of the school year and displaced like 18,000 kids. I had people, and then they blamed it on me. You know, there's ECOT pals online that, you know, they're all over me for closing their school and taking away their kids' choice. And some of the kids were doing good in ECOT, but they were doing well because their parents were sitting next to them helping them. You know, there was no oversight. There was no interaction. There was no human interaction if you didn't want it. So like you could just honestly click in the morning and then go lay on the couch all day.
Yeah, lack of accountability and responsibility even by the students.
And that was the problem. And they were getting paid the same amount of money as a public school down the street. That's crazy. So I'm glad that it's done. But if you're not vigilant about making sure that you're reminding people about recollecting that money, but also making sure that we keep the legislation tight so that it doesn't allow for somebody else to kind of find a way in.
Watching, you know, people that are listening, they can't really see what Joe's reaction is. I'm sitting across from him, so I always say, like, I'm a good reader of people's body language. Like, Joe gets fired up about this, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Joe was so I go step back a second. Like I mentioned, Joe growing up at Southside Boxing, a little bit boxing as a kid. So he's obviously a fighter. And we were talking beforehand, Joe's steadfastly approaching 40, and we were talking about, you know, staying fit and trying to stay strong and whatnot. Like, what's your walking around weight? Like, he's not what's your middleweight, your welterweight? Where you at now?
I would be a super middleweight right now.
Yeah?
About 170. So, yeah, not where you want to be if you want to make a comeback. So, when I fought at 132. You know, 170 is a little bit high, but I almost got talked into do a charity boxing match like 2 years ago, and I'm glad that I didn't because I thought about it. I talked to my wife. There's only like two things that were going to happen. Neither were really going to be good. Either you you knock somebody out or you hurt somebody and then you look like some like savage maniac, or you get your ass kicked and then you look like you got your ass kicked. And like, I didn't really want to do either one. And I didn't want to do it and just kind of move around, because then it's like weird. If you're going to do it, you got to try and you got to like train for it. Like it's a real fight. And I decided not to do it.
Well, you still look fit, man. Yeah. For not being a lightweight at 132, as a middleweight, super middleweight, you still look fit, man. You still got that fight in you, which is a good transition, because we talk about this a lot, and this was a popular thing just in this last election. There were a lot of candidates running as fighters, you know, with the idea of I'm a fighter, but there were actual guys who were running who had boxing experience. You used it as part of your narrative for a gubernatorial run, and as did some other guys. And it's nice to say we need to fight. That's a great narrative. And it's great that you actually have the experience, where literally and figuratively, both you fought in the ring and figuratively and literally for your constituents. But is that what we need right now in our political landscape, is more fighting?
No. And I would always say, when I would go to events across the state, if people read my bio, then they would want to talk about me being a boxer, right? And they'd say, "Oh, you fight," and I would always start off the speeches with, like, "Yes, that is in my bio, and that is part of who I am. But I always go down to Columbus in order to get things done, work with others first." Fighting is the second thing you do. I mean, you only fight if you can't get stuff done and you feel like people are getting screwed, like with ECOT and with some of these things with the payday lenders and issues where they're shortchanging a lot of the people in the urban communities and the poor rural communities and giving all these tax cuts to, LLCs and professional. Like, that's unfair, and I will fight that. But the goal is to always work with people. And even when they're people that you fought with before, you can't hold grudges. You got to get stuff done and play with the players that are on the field. So I would always start with, like, "Hey, man, you got to get this stuff done." And if you talk to anybody in Columbus, they will tell you that I would always try to work first. But when I did fight, I would fight hard.
Well, that's a beautiful way to put it, because it's certainly the mentality that I think we need to have, not only in the political landscape, but just in general. Like, let's work through our differences. You don't sit down. Everyone's so gung-ho. We had Leo Connolly in last week, and, Leo's got an amazing story talking about all the stuff that he did. And, it's traumatic what he had to go through and some of the stuff that he did. And he would say, "I'd do it again and I'd fight again," because he's a fighter. But he also knows you got to compromise. War, should be the last. And I use war not only as like Sun Tzu war or our military war, but this idea of contested and conflict and banging heads just because we're on one side or this guy's on the other. I love that you have the understanding and mentality that, hey, if we got to get it on, I'm going to get it on. But let's talk about it first.
Yeah, that's the last thing I want to do. I mean, that it really is, because that's the last thing people want. And so I try to stay away from, like, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to do it every day. And we're going to, because it's like, well, we do want you to be a fighter, but we want you to be somebody that can work first and work together and think about ways that you could do things collaboratively, because Youngstown needs Columbus. Columbus needs, like, we want the communities to be with each other, not against each other. Oftentimes there's this, well, the 3 C's get everything. Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. We're all getting screwed, therefore we got to fight them. But they are the big dogs. And so you got to work with the legislators from there in order to get things done for up here. And what I would try to do, I would try to bring people from Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati to Youngstown for different events, to the Mahoning Valley, to Warren, show them what it's like up here. And when they would go home, they would have a way different impression of our community than they had prior to coming here, especially if they've never been here or they hadn't been here for the last 20 years. They saw all the improvements. They saw good things happening. It's not some mafia headquarters, some like everybody's corrupt from the barber to the baker. It's like, you got to be kidding me. But that's what a lot of people think about our community and our area. And I had to fight that a lot when I was traveling the state running for governor.
Well, it's a beautiful way to put it too, that, and I'll say it like this, our words are so important, and our leaders have to be mindful of the words and the phraseology that they use, because you don't want to get people lathered up to the point where they want to fight, and that's what they think. Now the whole consensus of the populace is, this is how we get things done, is by going down there and kicking in the door. How about we go down there and we shake some hands? Let's make friends first. Let's try to make friends. And it's funny that you bring up the 3 C's, because we often hear that. But if you look at the population base, they're bigger populations. I mean, so by design, they're kind of probably proportionally going to get maybe more. And so, yeah, we definitely can't have that. I'll flip it into our national scene. President Trump President Trump's like a heavyweight, man. I mean, President Trump, if he gets in the ring, okay, he's a heavyweight. Joe, when you got in the ring as a lightweight, how'd you do, man? Did you whip some ass? You look like an ass whipper, man. I mean, I don't know you in those contexts. I met you, Joe, way after this, but did you do good? Did you kick some ass?
I had 5 fights. I won 4. The first fight, I got crushed. I mean, I remember I fought at Struthers Fieldhouse. It was 1995. I was like 16, and this guy I was so overmatched. You know, the way that they schedule amateur fights, and I think it's a little different now, but then you had what was called a pass book, which was nothing more than a little notebook that had some scribbles from the trainer of how many fights that kid had and like where they fought
Which is lies mostly.
Right, which is all lies.
It's all
So like basically the matchmaker would like look at me and you and be like, how much you weigh, bud? 132. Oh, how old are you? And it was just like all like, you could say whatever you wanted. And then they would be like, all right, well, you two are fighting. And so that's what happened that night. It was a kid from Brunswick, and he just killed me. I got 3 standing 8s against me. My mom was crying. It was terrible.
Oh, no.
But I won the next 4 fights, one in Aliquippa, one in Erie, one in Youngstown, one in Cleveland. And then I went off to college, and then I decided, then I just did it as a
You don't want to get your brain rattled. Yeah,
no, I
keep
mean,
that
you
brain.
get a little uglier, but I mean, it's like, it was an awesome sport. It was an awesome sport for me because, I wasn't really big enough or fast enough to play Division I football or basketball or baseball. I liked all 3 of those sports. I still play all 3 of those sports, but I wasn't good enough because I wasn't fast enough or big enough. I was small and I wasn't that fast. So you can't play at Boardman with that skill level. So an individual sport like boxing, you can create your own path. At that level, when you're first starting out, it's just about being in better shape than that person, wanting it more, and having a little bit of skill. But if you're in good shape and you want it, you could be successful as an amateur boxer because that's what it's all about, just being in shape and fighting.
Well, it helps you scrappy too. You're scrappy.
You got to have that fire.
Yeah, you got to have some fire.
Yeah, you have to. You have
So
to.
it was like kind of a funny segue. I was thinking about this last night because I used to kid with people. I said, if these guys want to send our sons and daughters off to war, why don't we get that? Listen, whoever our enemy is, I'm just going to, throw the name out, whatever. Okay. Kim Jong-un. Okay. Like you want to kill people, you want to fight and send your people to war. Whoever you're fighting, you got to get in the ring, or better yet, maybe it's just like no gloves, no rules, fist fight kind of deal. Cause boxing is a different deal than you're in obviously a bar room or a street fight or something along those lines. So I always used to say, like, who do you think, out of our leaders, like, who do you think would be a good fighter? Like, if you could probably still last 3 rounds, we were talking earlier, and you'd probably struggle and gut it out and push through it. But 3 rounds of fighting, even just keeping your hands up, is tremendous amount of energy. I don't think some of our leaders could probably do that because they're not in that shape. Like, look at Trump. Like, Trump talks about being a fighter. President Trump talks about being a fighter. I'm a fighter, and he shows it. He wants to fight everybody. Bro, you think President Trump could get in there? You think he could kick some ass?
No, he would get killed.
He would get killed.
He looks like remember King Hippo from Punch Out? I mean, he's that big belly, the flat chest. I mean, narrow shoulders. Like, he's just like,
sloppy.
He is.
You're sloppy.
And he acts like a super tough guy. You're all tanned up and, your hair is just, I'm not a big Trump fan. I don't like to go crazy about Trump because I don't like that Trump supporters then think I'm talking about them too.
Right.
Because I'm not.
Right.
I don't like President Trump, and I'll tell you why. I think he lies. I think he cheats. I think that he is all about himself. That doesn't mean that I think all the people that voted for Trump are deplorable or horrible or, a lot of people that voted for Trump were just looking for change.
Yeah.
And so they took that risk and they threw it out and said, well, let's break this thing. And this guy's willing to do it. But I think, I just pray that we can get somebody to beat him in 2020. And Democrats have to get their stuff together, though, because it's very, very fragmented right now.
So in that same vein, the last 20 years of presidents, out of the presidents, you remember they used to have like the what was that? The Super 7 or Super. Remember they had that middleweight competition where all the middleweights. I think Andre Ward ended up winning it. What was that called? The Super.
I think it was called the Super 7. It was something
or
like
Super
that.
6.
They had it was pretty cool.
It was like
They
a
did
box off.
tournament. Yeah.
So you got, I'll just name them. You got Obama, you got Clinton, you got Bush, you got Trump, you got the other Bush, and maybe Reagan. Reagan's kind of, he was older at the time. He was in his 80s. I always think about Reagan with that great Genesis video, Land of Confusion. They're puppets. You got these guys they're going to get, maybe not even in the ring. Let's just not even say in the ring. Because I think, me personally, I think Obama and Bush, the two, they were both health guys. So they probably could last the 3 rounds and gut it out. Let's just say street fight, okay? Like... No gloves. Who's winning out of those group of who does Joe Schiavoni want to fight the least?
I'll tell you, I think that I was going to say exactly what you said, is that Obama and Junior were probably the most, they were healthy guys. Obama plays basketball, he runs. Bush was he played like college sports, and I'll never forget when after 9/11 when he came out in that bulletproof vest and threw that fastball right down the pipe at Yankee Stadium. Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
like
it was.
Like everybody was like scared, and like everybody was like, what do we get? And it was some dumb pitch at a baseball game, but right down the middle, cool, calm,
Zinger.
collective.
Yeah.
Like, let's do this. Like, we're America. We got this. Like, I'm ready. And so that to me always, and it's weird that like I didn't like his politics. I didn't like a lot of the stuff he did, but that one thing always sticks out to me is something that I love about him. And so, I mean, I think I'll go with Bush.
Yeah,
I mean,
me too, bro. Me too.
I love Bush. And going back to that 9/11, can you imagine, wasn't he the perfect president for that moment? Whether you liked his politics or not, sometimes I often say, what if Al Gore was there? Or what if there was a different person? I cannot imagine another person. Bush was the perfect person for the spirit of America.
No, at that point, I agree. I mean, he said a bunch of dumb stuff all the time, and he wasn't the smartest.
Bushisms.
Bushisms.
But like,
he was like
that
a
day was
Texas
big day.
shit kicker, man. We're going to go down here, but
Smoke them out of their holes and all that
right,
stuff. I mean,
yeah.
But Obama to me, he could have embraced that moment as well and given us that hope that we needed and that feeling of security as well. I could see him doing the same thing. The rest of the guys, I mean, maybe not.
Yeah. President Obama was definitely a better speaker and statesman. Bush was, to me, to go back during that time, they had a rally out here, Rally for the Valley, because it rhymes. And Tim Ryan spoke and a bunch of others, but it was for Delphi when Delphi was going through their deal, and they had all these union officials. And I can remember we shot video of it. There's a film somewhere online, a short video of it online, and people had these. I mean, they hated this. Obviously, this area where we're from, if you're listening from somewhere else, Northeast Ohio, Trumbull, Mahoning counties, like this is a Democratic stronghold, and people are blue collar in their union, and so they typically lean that way. They had these signs of Bush, worst president ever. And I can remember being in my 20s and feeling that same zeitgeist at that time, that energy, and thinking, this uneducated shit kicker, he's down there from Texas, and he's only there because, and Bush Sr., head of the CIA, I mean, he was very polished and all this other stuff, and you kind of felt like, oh, this guy got this thing. But I'll tell you what, out of all those dudes, he'd be the first dude I'd want to sit down and have a beer with.
Oh, yeah.
And if it turned into like, hey, there's some scrappers in this bar and we got to take care of business, I'm rocking with Bush too, man. I think that dude put his boots on and kicked some ass, man.
He genuinely loved America.
He really did. He really did.
Out of anyone, genuinely loved America.
Yeah. And we always look back later with rose-tinted glasses a little bit and go like, oh, I don't know if we'll do the same with Trump, but that's a tale for maybe another podcast. Fighter, boxer, negotiator, attorney, your term limited out. You just came off leadership, minority leader. You're running for governor. You decide to run for governor. And I'll get to that too. I want to delve back just for a second into the guys who use that fight boxing mentality And there was a couple of them. I don't remember who they all were. But there was a guy from PA, and there was two guys. One's like, I'm a Marine. He won the Marine boxing championship or whatever. How those guys do? I'm legit asking because I don't know the answer.
No,
Did they win?
I have no idea. I mean,
I wonder if that narrative wins.
I didn't want to use it, but I will tell you that it does give you something normal and good to talk about with people on campaign, right? Like, so you're traveling around, like, you don't know all these people. You're meeting hundreds, thousands of strangers a day. But like, I'd have people come up and be like, I saw your boxing video. You know, my uncle was a boxer. You know, my cousin was the champ of the blah, 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 blah. So it breaks down that like barrier of this guy's a politician and I'm a regular guy.
Right.
And like him and I we're not the same. It broke that down to where it gave us something to talk about that wasn't related to politics before we talk about politics. And I think that's the best way to talk about politics, is to talk about something else first. Make sure that you get on the same page, whether it's your kids, whether it's baseball, whether it's boxing, whether it's whatever it might be, before you talk about politics. Because when you talk about politics, you're not going to agree on everything, and you can't let it go sideways. You got to just stay in and try to concentrate on things that you have in common. And so, yeah, I don't know how those other guys did, but they probably thought the same thing. It gives you something real to talk to people about before you talk to them about politics.
That gives you a level of connectivity.
Yeah.
You said commonality. You know, you find the middle ground first. When I was in sales, I mean, we're all in sales. Yeah, I always say this to my people. We're always selling ourselves, whether we're in sales or not. I taught school for a number of years. I was selling then too. I was selling this, what's on the blackboard, and how this is important for education, and why I should be teaching. You know, that whole deal. You're always selling to a point, and I think you've got to. When I would walk into a client for a first time on a cold call, I would always look behind them and try to find like what's on their wall. Oh, this guy's a golfer. Okay, I don't golf. I'm going to move on from that. Oh, this guy's got kids. At the time I was young, I don't have kids. Where's my? Oh, wait a second. I see a book on the. He's got. A book on George Patton, and I read that book, or I know about. I'm going to find that line. Oh, if you're a Patton fan, find that line of commonality. I think that's what great. My grandfather used to say, there's a difference between politicians and statesmen. And I ain't blowing smoke, man. Okay. When you were in the Senate and when you ran for governor, you projected a very secure sense of a statesman. You're a politician. That word sometimes gets mislabeled or has a bad connectivity because we've perpetrated this, idea that it's, and people accept it now. Oh, well, what do you expect? He's a politician. They almost accept the fact that, it's, he's going to take bad campaign contributions, or they lie, or they cheat, or well, that's just how it's done. Well, no, man, that's not, we don't have to accept that. That's not how it's done. And you always did a great job of projecting that you're not in that vein. You're not just a guy that's out there saying what he needs to say to get elected. You're actually there because you care.
Well, I think that I appreciate that. And I think that you have to, actions speak louder than words. Like every politician now says, well, I'm not like a politician. I'm like a regular guy. Well, if you got to say that, then you're not, right? So, but if you're doing stuff and you're working hard for people and they're feeling it, then they say it. People will come up to me and say, you know what, man? I came to this thing. I didn't really want to come to it because it was political, but you're not like a politician at all. And like, I guess that's a compliment because because they're saying that they thought it was going to be some way. They thought it was going to be something different. They were pleasantly surprised about the way that it went. And now they're engaged in the process again. And we have to get people, we have to restore hope. We have to restore trust. We have to restore faith. That's why this stuff is not that hard. I mean, being a politician, being an elected official, being a statesman, whatever the word if you treat people properly, you're truthful all the time, and you try to get things done, the rest of it is all the details. That's the deal right there. I mean, it's just bringing it to people and bringing that trust and bringing that down to earth spirit that everybody wants. You're a representative of them, and they got to feel that. And so I think that people that have political ambition, they screw it up because they're constantly thinking about the next step. So they're like, oh, if I say this, then they're going to use this against me in this campaign and blah, blah. It's like, no, just do what you're supposed to do today. And the rest of it will fall into place.
Do the right thing.
Today.
Spike Lee, do the right thing.
That's it.
I was on stage one time, I was giving a workshop, and it was a small stage. There's like 30, 40 people in the room. And they're asking, the question is, what's the most important thing for a candidate? What do you tell people as a consultant? What's the most important thing? And I said, well, what do you guys think? And I got a lot of answers like, well, money. You got to have a lot of money. Okay, that's true. No, that's not the right. Well, you gotta look the part. Yep. Okay, there's something to that too. And we'd go around and they say, okay, well, what is it? What's the magic bullet? Everybody wants to know, what's the magic bullet? What's the most important? The truth. Like, just tell the truth. If you do that, then you don't, just like they taught you in grade school, you don't have to worry about anything else because you told the truth. So you don't have to worry about, what did I tell this guy? What did I tell that guy? And people have great bullshit detectors. And they'll feel if it's inauthentic, like I don't know how many political commercials I've shot. I mean, we've done over 65 plus campaigns and yada. And I always say, like, they'll be in front of the green screen or they'll be here. They're trying to do it on camera to project to the voter who's watching in a 30-second clip what they're saying. Okay, let's do it again. Why? What's wrong? You didn't believe it. Like, you better have authenticity and it be something that someone can't look and go, oh, he's just doing it because the lights are on. Like, you better feel it and you better believe it or it doesn't translate.
Well, and now I'm not trying to, ass kiss you at this point, but that's exactly what I was just going to say. It's like, I go to these workshops and the people that are putting on the workshops, I hate workshops. I've only been to like 3 of them because what the person telling you what to do, they're saying you have to try to be authentic, candidates. It's like, well, if you're trying to be authentic, then you're not authentic. Then they're like, you got to show the people that you care.
Isn't that the reason you're there anyways?
You got to learn all this stuff. You're dead. I mean, you're dead meat. You might get through the local campaign that you're running for, but eventually that sense that people have that this person is putting on a show for me, they're going to be turned off.
Yeah.
And they're going to be turned off quick. So I talk a lot about, when I talk to candidates and they ask me, what do I need to do? What do I need to say? I'm like, look, what do you believe in? What is the issue that you really want to change? And then they tell me and I'm like, hone that thing in, bring it. Tell me why that's important. Bring it out, show people, let people know, and do it in a real way. Make the people that are watching you give this speech feel it. And walk out of there and maybe, get a little sweat or get a little tingle or get a little like, man, that feels good. Like, let's go. I want to help that dude. Like, you have to bring it to him. And I can't tell you how to bring it to him. It's got to come from within.
Right. You either got it or you don't.
Or you could go do something else. I mean, but if you don't have the fire and the belief, yeah, the knowledge is great and the money is huge and the look is good and all those things you talk about, those are all important. But if you don't have that fire and that belief, then you might win a couple elections, but you're not going to win the big one that you want.
Well, and because of that fire and belief, you throw your hat in the ring in this gubernatorial race. In the primary against some really big names, right? And I'll just go through it like right quick. The race is held. You get almost 10% of the vote in the state, 63,000 plus total votes, which is I'm blowing smoke. This is a great showing for a guy who's got very little name recognition throughout the state, other than for the people who are already engaged in politics, because most people are like low informed, right? We always talk about the low informed voter, and that's the majority of people. And when I say majority, it's 75, 80, 85%, and it may be even higher than that. I love that you talked about engagement earlier, but you did really well considering that. You won Trumbull and Mahoning counties by wide margins, but you fell short a little bit. Now, we can talk about that a little bit later. So now we've got DeWine in there. And And we talked about hostility. What's the feeling? What feeling do you have in terms of how it's going? And remember that magic 8 ball you used to have as a kid? You'd shake it up and it'd be like, so Joe Schiavoni's got the magic 8 ball, and it's not just, yes, no answers or, try again later. Okay. You got the magic 8 ball. Does the state seem as hostile as the nation is?
Oh, no. I mean, there is hostility and there are turmoil on certain issues, but I think that you'll see if you watch the State House news or you can go on these stations in the middle of the night and you can see hearings. It's not like constant bomb throwing. I mean, abortion and guns are two issues that get people going nuts on both sides, and we deal with those a lot in Columbus, and so it does get very heated on those two issues. The rest of the issues, you try to work through them and you'll see a lot more people getting along now. It's also because when one side has so much power, the other side sometimes doesn't put up that strong of a fight, and that's a problem in Ohio. So that might lead to the general voter to look and say they don't see all that fighting. In Washington, the margins are so close. Like, the House is Democratic, the Senate's Republican, you got Trump. So, like, everybody's fighting for every single inch because they want to keep the power or gain the power. But in Ohio, the Republicans got it. And so you'll see a less fighting. But there is a lot of there's a lot of arguments when it comes to those heartfelt social issues that people really fight for.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. I love hearing that because, all politics are local, and obviously the state of Ohio is where we live. So I love to see when people are working together. You see, for full disclosure, Glenn Holmes and Mike O'Brien and Sean O'Brien are clients of mine. But I love hearing when those guys say, hey, we're working with these guys. And sometimes they'll catch some slack back home. I think specifically maybe Sean O'Brien, he'll catch some slack back home. Like, oh, he's siding with these Republicans, that son of... Like, well, you got to get along, with people to go... you got to go along sometimes to get along so that... I'm not saying you should just roll over, obviously, but I like when people are working together, we talked about earlier, rather than... He's a Republican. He's a Democrat. I hate him because he's a Democrat. I hate him. He's a Republican. We're going to fight these people just because whatever. Like, take the uniforms off. We're not wearing red and blue. Okay. We're all on the same team. This is like an inter squad scrimmage, and we all got to go back to the school later and be buddies. You
got to at least be able to get along. You don't have to be buddies, but you have to at least be able to get along for the next day. So you can't blow up the relationship so hard that you can't even stand this person or look at this person, because that's what's happening in Washington. I could be mad at people down in Columbus and they could be mad at me. But the next day, you could work on something. And if it doesn't work that day, then try it the next day. But that's what your job is.
Well, you're working for the greater good.
But it is difficult to be like where Sean is. Sean's in a tough spot because that's a 50-50 district on paper.
Yep.
So you have to walk that fine line of working with the other side, but not just getting blown over by the other side, because then you could get primaried, right? So it's a sticky situation for guys like that, and it's a little tough. But Sean does a good job, and so does Mike, and so does Glenn. They're all good dudes that I worked with for a long time down there.
I'll give you a number, because we talked about Kasich and now we've got DeWine. And I remember Cordray and DeWine during their debate said, yeah, we're going to give some money back, or we got this $2.7 billion, this rainy day fund. And we do a lot of work with nonprofits. And like I said, talking about different boards and stuff. I'll bring up April Caraway, who's they changed, they used to be Lifelines. Now it's the Trumbull County Mental Health and Recovery Board. Is that correct?
Correct.
In addiction. And she would always say, and I work with local law enforcement. I have a lot of friends that are both on the road and in administration, and everyone talk about, man, they took money from us so that we don't have XYZ. Some of these agencies may be top heavy, right? I mean, there's some of that, just like some of the schools, in particular, remember Saved by the Bell? What was the principal's name?
Belding.
Mr. Belding,
yeah.
Right? There was only one principal. Now we got pod principals for schools and stuff. Oh my gosh. So there's sometimes some fat up top. But I feel like obviously people need to live within their means. And that Kasich kind of, I don't want to use the term stealing, but taking these local funds and withholding them so they weren't getting distributed back to the counties and municipalities. He took some of this money and he made them tighten their belt. Now we've had 8 years and Kasich's gone. Should the state give back some money? Like, how does that work, man?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Kasich used that for his political gain. You know, when he became the governor, we were just getting out of the recession, and he said, you know, everybody's got to tighten their belts, trim the fat. Locals, you're on your own. The state has to, you know, pull back because of the recession, which made sense at that point. But at what point, he never turned it back over. He never made it right. He never made it fair. So now we have a checking account with billions of dollars sitting in it while we have potholes, you know, 3-foot potholes in, you know, schools that can barely keep the lights on. And that's real. And you have all these services that are stretched to the max. Like the people have trimmed and they've done a lot of trimming. And so now it's time that we figure out how to invest that in the future. When I was running for governor, I talked a lot about using a portion of that rainy day fund and investing it into the future. So invest it into clean water for Lake Erie or down the river, blight remediation. You can use $500 million of it to give every 3- and 4-year-old an opportunity for high quality pre-K. Like, that's a way that you rebuild a state. Broadband internet access for everybody. Like, there's a lot of places that we could spend that money. If you just don't want to give it back to the locals, you can invest it in everybody so everybody gets a little piece. But to just hold it and say, well, I'm doing it because I'm fiscally responsible, that's ridiculous. But that's what he did. And so I know DeWine has said that he's going to do something with it to reinvest, but now people got to hold his feet to the fire and actually do it.
So, Governor DeWine, I know you're listening to the podcast. I got a suggestion. I'm going to get my piece in there. $2.7 million. Let's give back $250 million to this, but it has to be used for, you know, we can still be fiscally responsible. It has to be used proportionally to the areas that were hit the hardest for mental health and addiction recovery, and another $250 million for safety services potentially, but for local infrastructure and blight removal. So, because I think those two things, especially in areas that are hit the hardest, stimulate job growth, stimulate economic development, and give people who need it the most, one of the most overlooked words in all of politics when we talk about constituents: purpose. We talk about jobs. Everyone's like, we're going to fight for jobs and jobs. It's giving somebody purpose. And if you give them a job to go to, boy, they have purpose. And then they see that job, when they look back at it and that road's built or that bridge is built or that school looks better or the parks are better or they're safer on the street, or their brother or sister or themselves have got the addiction recovery, they've went to rehab or they're actively seeking some help, then you start to see, oh, that was good. I have some purpose now. That seems to get lost in the political shuffle as we're out there like fighting for scraps. So, Governor DeWine, I hope you're listening. Let's give some of that money back. But then also, and here's my question to you, because I don't understand it, and our listeners may not either. There was a percentage of money they were holding back. Maybe they hold less of it back. I don't know what that is, but is there a formula for how much they held back?
There's really not, but I agree with you. I mean, you're talking about $500 million out of $2.7 million that could really make an impact.
$2.7 billion.
Or $2.7 billion.
Yep.
I mean, so you're talking about, less than, 25% of it for things that really could matter. It's not like spend it down to, one
Zero,
penny.
right.
And I would argue that do the two things that you talked about, do $500 million for universal quality pre-K. And I think that you spend $1 billion, you have $1.7 billion left. And then you can start doing some things. I mean, there's not a magical solution. They could easily, in the next operating budget, which is this year, just allocate more dollars. Now, what he's done, he doesn't really want to touch it. I don't think he wants to bring it that deep. So he's going to do a gas tax and try to then give a portion of that back to the locals rather than...
Let's tax some more. Tax them again. And this is why people get so frustrated, right? as the non officials, you're there, you're like, wait, we're getting taxed to death. You know, you hate to hear, and I'm friends with some of these guys on the local level, even like our, Trumbull County here. Oh, well, we may have to, holy cow, man. Like, I got taxed. We're taxed enough.
People go nuts. School levies, police and fire, and it's all because the state has not invested properly in the locals. So it's really not their fault, but people don't really care whose fault it is. They're just pissed they got to pay it, right? It's like, well, I don't care if it's the state guys. I don't care if it's Trump's fault. I don't care if it's the county commissioners because they were fiscally irresponsible. Somebody's got to tell me why this is going to be worthwhile to me, because right now I know that I'm paying X amount. Last year it was Y, and now if you're going to put a gas tax on this thing, every time I fill up my car, it's an extra $5. That's going to ding me, and that's going to hurt me, and that's going to really upset people. That's a conversation that they're having right now in Columbus about how they're going to fund infrastructure and local governments for the next 2 years.
Well, and there is a cap on it too, right? They can only have, I think, 8.5% of an overage, like whatever they're holding on to, that $2.7 billion. And they're close to it. I think it's like whatever the amount of money is, they're close to that 8.5. And I think I read somewhere they had like a $600 million surplus anyways. So correct me if I'm wrong. So you got 2.7 and you got 6, now you got 3.2 billion.
There's a lot of number fudging.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing.
It's like when you were a fighter.
Well, it's like the lottery. Like people, like a lot of older people go nuts about the lottery because when they first talked about the lottery in the state of Ohio, the money was supposed to be dedicated solely for education. And it is. But they pulled out all the other money they were given to education. You give them the lottery money. So it's not like they were getting X plus Y. Now they're just getting X. But it's just a shell game.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that people go nuts about. Where did that money go? Because if you would have given them the lottery money plus the actual money that the state was giving public education, then you wouldn't have all these schools that have to go for levies and increases because they would be funded properly and they would be funded in a constitutional manner. So that's the frustration.
I was at an event, actually, that one of my clients, one of my candidates, now Judge Sam Bluedorn. Sam, shout out. What's up, man? I hope you're listening. He hosted Joe, and Joe was talking about business and corporations, and it piqued my interest. And I kind of made a mental note. I'm like, man, the next time I see Joe, I got to ask him about this. And you kind of talked about this in the campaign a lot. And I want to drill down to this issue because I think this is what you're saying. I want to know. First off, the 28th constitutional amendment, this corporate personhood. Explain that a little bit, the elevator pitch to corporate personhood for the listener.
Well, so in politics, we'll just use Ohio, for example. You can give $12,700 individually. Like you could give me $12,700 to run for governor in 2022 if you wanted to. So there are caps, but you could give $12.7 million to We Love Joe PAC. And then with that $12.7 million, We Love Joe PAC can do commercials against my opponent for $12.7. So like, it's not, you have caps, but they're not real caps. There's also all this other stuff so that rich families could really funnel all their money. Like your son's not old enough, but if your son was 8, he could give $12,700 to me, or $12,700 to me.
If he was 8?
Yeah. So it would be your money.
Even though he can't even vote.
Correct.
No kidding.
But in his name, your wife could as well.
Right.
So there are caps, but there's maneuvers around the caps. And when you have PACs and everybody can unload unlimited monies into PACs and then start a PAC that is either for or against that individual, then there are no caps. And so that amendment people talk about to get money out of politics. I understand that. I mean, more than anybody. I had $800,000. I was going against Cordray, who had $8 million. And so when you have 10% of the money that the other person does, then my problem was that, yes, I did well in the Valley because I had 10 years of working with people in the Valley and they knew me and they trusted me. But I couldn't get on TV in Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati to show people who I am and what I can do. I could only do it by face-to-face interaction every day, which I did, but you can't reach the masses. You can't reach that. I don't like to call them uneducated voters because it's not a fair term, but you can't reach that casual voter.
Uninformed.
Casual voter. Like,
casual voter.
You know,
Good.
the person that is going to vote but doesn't go to the town hall forums. They don't really watch the debates. They don't really read the political sections of the newspapers.
And it's not their fault. They're busy day to day. They're working 40, 50 hours a week.
What they do is they got the
family.
TV on during the morning, or when they're on Facebook and they see these ads come by. And so, I mean, Cordray just in the primary, he spent $200,000 a week on a commercial with him and Obama. And so that the casual voter, when they were on Facebook, could be like, Cordray worked for Obama? Cool. I like Obama. Cordray's good.
Right.
And they didn't get to see me because I wasn't in front of their face.
Well, that's what I love about this format. People keep asking me, like, "What, dude, you're doing all this stuff. Why are you doing a podcast?" I said, because I get to come in connection and contact with people who are interesting, who have a much deeper understanding of certain subjects, and we can't tell that in a 30-second TV commercial or a 2-minute video or a 2-minute news clip. Sometimes you got to sit down and spend the time actually having a conversation. And boy, if people could be a fly on a room sometimes in the conversations that I've had with people all over, then they have a better understanding. And I think it's great that you're here today. And I'm really happy that you clarified that, because there's that corporate personhood, you know, the idea that it protects the corporations from unfair treatment and overreach from the government, but it also, you know, they're like, a business is not a person, right? But some small businesses, us included, we're a corporation. I mean, just by paper. Like, people are like, oh, you're a corporation? Oh, how many?
Right, you filed a piece of paper with the Secretary of State.
Exactly. And they're like, oh, okay. But, you know, you need that for some protectionism against liability and all these other things that are too complex to get into in this short conversation. But really, you boiled it down to what I felt was the heart of the thing, which is we need campaign finance reform.
Yeah, because, and maybe I didn't explain this properly, but that rich individual that wants to give money, unlimited money to that person because they want them to win, can do it personally by giving it to all their other family members, or just making their family members do it, or making their VP and their CEO and CFO do it, or they can get their corporation to unload unlimited amounts into those PACs, because an individual candidate cannot take corporate dollars, but the PAC can. And so that's how you get around campaign finances. You know, the big corps give huge money to these PACs, and then these PACs are either for or against that person or that issue.
Yeah, I love that you better define that. And it's that idea of the 28th Constitutional Amendment, whatever that amendment is, right? Because we have to change the Constitution in order to do that. But maybe it's restricting those corporations or those people from corrupting through the contributions ad nauseum to these political campaigns. Because people are like, well, you're a corporation. You can't even give to, you can't give to an individual candidate, but I could, like you said, I could take, if I had $100,000 sitting around, I could take $100,000 and give it to a PAC, and they could run ads against my friend Joe Schiavoni.
Or four,
right.
Or against an issue that is important to them or that they don't want to see occur. I mean, that's the stuff that I think is frustrating. And I don't have a magical solution to how to fix that, because I understand that if you don't have money, then you can't hire people and you can't run ads, and you need that. So I don't know how to fairly say like what the fair amount is that each person that files would be allowed to spend, or what the cap should be. It's just, if you're going to have caps, you got to enforce them. And you can't, and I think the easiest way is to eliminate corporate donations, put personal caps without all these loopholes. And I think you'd have much more fair elections.
Well, I was listening to my man Joe Rogan, and he had somebody on who was talking about money in politics, and he at first I was like, that'll never work. But what this guy was talking about on a federal level, you could even open it up to on a state or local level. Each person has a $100 voucher for public/government funded elections. That gets everybody involved in the entire, if you're 18 or older and whatever those stipulations may be, you have to obviously be a citizen, you have to be paying taxes, you can incentivize it so that, hey, yeah, you're paying taxes and you're working or whatever those things are. But everybody has a voucher and everybody has 4 credits, if you will. If you took $100 and divided by 4, everybody's got $25. And, oh, I like Joe. I want to give my publicly funded thing to Joe, and Joe can then use that $25 to buy a radio ad. Or I'm going to give him all of it, or I'm going to give him none of it because I want to disengage. But we don't have enough engagement, and that may be a way to kind of whet the appetite and bring people in. I don't know if that's based on a tax credit or whatever, but
gives them some skin in the game.
Skin in the game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it would be interesting, but it's an idea that is worth going down that road. I was just at another event. I was speaking in Cleveland on Saturday, and a guy brought this idea about ranked voting out. I've heard this before at other places where, like, in a primary, you rank your favorite, your second favorite, your third favorite, and your fourth favorite. And then you add up the points to win. So it's not just who gets the most first place votes, it's who gets the most points. So, like,
interesting.
If you got so it's a different way to, it's kind of like the rating system. Like when you're rating something, if somebody gets a lot of 4 out of 5s, that's really good. Maybe they didn't get a lot of 5s, but they didn't get any 1, 2s, or 3s. So everybody, it's just a different way to look at it.
Sure.
It's something that the guy sent me some information I was looking at.
Well, I love that you've been passionate about education. You've been holding charter schools more accountable. Your passion's fantastic. I love this idea of ranked voting potentially, or that you're open to some of these ideas and different way to campaign finance and different way to run things. You were top 3, back to this gubernatorial thing, you were top 3 in most, the majority, like a big majority in most Ohio counties. Dennis Kucinich ran in the primary. He's 72 years old. Dennis probably ain't running in 4 years. Cordray, at the end of the day, Cordray won the Democratic primary. He got 2 million votes. DeWine got 2.2 million and some change, pretty close race. DeWine's 73. He's going to be 76 when he's running for re-election. I don't know. What's next for Joe Schiavoni in the next few years? Are you projecting that far out? I know you're practicing law now. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what I know is that by running that campaign the way that we did and not dropping out when there was a lot of pressure to drop out, people saw something that gave them a good feeling, right? And so people were still calling for me to come and speak in Cleveland, and I spoke out in Toledo, and I'm speaking at the College Dems conference, and I'm going down to Columbus to speak about the Youngstown plan for schools on Monday. And so there's a lot of people that want me to come down and talk about things that I've worked on, talk about things that I want to work on in the future. And so I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to see what happens in 2022. People have called me to run against Portman for, U.S. Senate. People are saying we'll make another run at governor. Others say, maybe get into a judicial place. Everybody's got an idea about it. And for me, it's like one day at a time. Work on my workers' comp stuff today, go to Columbus on Monday and talk about the Youngstown plan with the people out in Columbus. Over the weekend, I'm going to Cleveland with the kids to go to the Cavs game. So, I got to do that stuff. And, I have 2 boys, one's 6 and one's 4. And my wife and my parents and my kids, they sacrificed a whole hell of a lot in the last 2 years to do whatever I needed to do. And I kind of like for a minute that it's not about me, right? Like it's about them. It's about, like, my parents are in Florida right now. That's great. They don't got to worry about what if Joe has to go run to God knows where and we got to watch the kids because Margaret's working. Like it. So I kind of like that. Now I do miss it. I do miss it a lot. Because I think that there's a place for me where I could be meaningful and impactful. I don't know what that looks like or what position that is, but it's okay to take a thing off. People wanted me to run for state representative right out of the Senate or for state auditor for some of these other positions that would have been easier to attain than that governor's race. But I had a plan and we wanted to do it. And so I'm not in politics right now, but in the future, I think there'll be some other opportunities.
Well, I love that you're by nature a helper. You want to help, and you're concentrating your efforts to do that for the people. And I love that you said, and I want to pay your family's beautiful. You had 2 beautiful boys. You had a beautiful wife. God bless you. You definitely married up. You'd said you got beat up a little bit when you're boxing or younger. You still pulled a good-looking wife, and you got a beautiful family. And I'd love to hear you say that. Like, this is my concentration now. My concentration is, hey man, I'm going to be there for my family. Because I always tell everybody that will listen. They go, no, you're juggling this stuff. What's the most? What's the project you're working on? Man, I'm working on Legos with my kid. That's the thing, because this is a short window that they're young and that we get to enjoy.
And they want to be
that.
with you.
Yes.
I mean, they love you. They want to be with you. Like, and if you're every time they're saying, Dad, will you do this? Say, sorry, kid, got to go. Like, that stuff can have some long-term effects, right? Like, we spent a lot of time where I would make it so that it was fun, but it made it hard to say, well, yeah, you guys are going to come with me to Toledo, and then half the day I would be doing stuff there, and then the other half of the day we'd go to, the zoo or go to the Children's Museum. But we made it work for that year and a half where it was every day. Luckily, I have family in Columbus and some family throughout the state, and so it was nice because we can make it fun for the kids. And I don't know how much it really impacted them, but they were very small. If it was now, they get a little older, they could see that you're gone a lot more. And it is what it is. You just do the best you can. You're right on, and it's about spending time with them. You got to work and you got to be ambitious. That's part of life too. But you got to try to balance all of that.
Yeah, you're setting a great example for your sons and for your community and everybody around you. And so whatever you decide to do in 2022, is that one? Yeah, it's 2022. Whatever you decide to do there, I know it'll be the right thing and be successful. I'm excited. I would be excited to see what Joe Schiavoni, Governor Joe Schiavoni's state of Ohio looks like. I bet that would be a really cool picture. I hope you'll come on another time and maybe we'll paint that picture a little bit more.
Definitely.
Bro, I loved having you on, man. You're such a great dude. There's always great energy, and man, I wish people could get to know you as not that we're hanging out and drinking beers and we're barbecuing and stuff like that, but the time I've got to spend with you, I've always enjoyed it. I got a lot of respect for you, and I appreciate you coming on today, man.
Hey, same here. I'll be back anytime. We'll keep working together.
Joe Schiavoni, folks, on the podcast. Thank you. And that is it. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast today with Joe Schiavoni. We're going to have him back on because we just kind of scratched the surface. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about, like the fact, is Joe maybe thinking about, it's so early. We did touch on it, but I wanted to bring this fact out. Joe was the top 3 vote getter in almost every county in the state of Ohio when he ran in the Democratic primary. Dennis Kucinich, who also was a top 3 vote getter in most counties, is 72 years old. He may or may not run again. Does that leave the opening for Joe? Maybe. I don't know, but I know Joe's really passionate about fighting for workers' rights and really staying on education as his main issue, along with other great things that he's doing. So I appreciate him coming on the show. And I'm also going to preface this. We've got some more politicos and political candidates and political, public office holders, elected officials who will be coming on the show in the future. So stay tuned. And you could stay tuned to theprodcast.net if you haven't been to our website. Visit the site. You can find out a little bit about the podcast and see some links to some of our guests' shows or places that you can visit to find out more about them. If you go to theprodcast.net, you can listen to the podcast there. But you also, we would love for you to do this, visit Spotify, visit iTunes, go to the iTunes app, the podcast app on your phone, search Jim Fogarty, the Prodcast. Find us, see our little cow and prod logo, and subscribe to that. Totally would appreciate that. And share theprodcast.net with your friends and your family and anyone else that you think may benefit from hearing some of our guests and their expertise and learning about them. Theprodcast.net was created and developed, the website, by MDI Studios. Shout out to Brandon. I'm going to give him I have a message that he left me a while ago, but I'm going to use that in a future podcast because he wants to make sure we get his plug in, and I want to make sure we get his plug in too. So theprodcast.net, if you go to that site and you like it and you need a website for your business, etc., check out mdistudios.com. He can hook you up. Hey, with that, our next episode, we have got a fantastic on-air personality who came from radio, used to be a radio DJ, now is a on-air meteorologist in one of the Youngstown television stations. Tune back in to our next episode of the podcast to check him out. Hey, with that, peace. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful, wonderful time with your loved ones. And until then, stay electrified.